Keeping honeybees healthy is more challenging than ever these days. One of the main concerns for beekeepers is the parasitic mite Varroa destructor, also known as Varroa mite. The Varroa mite is regarded as the most economically important honeybee pest at this time and can be challenging to control. Not only is the Varroa mite damaging on its own, but it's also capable of transmitting harmful viruses. It weakens the bees, making them susceptible to other diseases and stressors. Therefore, controlling Varroa helps to mitigate multiple risks. Monitoring your Varroa levels in order to determine whether treatment is necessary is critical to maintaining the health of your colony. If you have brood in your hives, it is likely that Varroa is reproducing in your hives. There are a number of options available for controlling Varroa, but as mites have become resistant to products, regular sampling and monitoring has become more important than ever. You need to know what your Varroa levels are in order to keep your bees healthy. Sampling is conducted to determine the level of Varroa and whether treatment is necessary, or to assess whether a past treatment was effective. Knowing your Varroa levels will help you decide which treatment products to use. For example, if levels are high, a treatment product with a high level of mite kill or efficacy is needed. If levels are low or near threshold, you may decide to use no treatment or a treatment that normally provides less control in conjunction with continued monitoring. The best time to sample is determined by each beekeeper, the season, the progress of their colonies, and their treatment preferences. Early monitoring in spring and fall is important because it allows time for planning your control strategy. In spring, sampling should occur early and leave enough treatment withdrawal time before supers are added. The time to sample can be determined by counting back from the date you normally add the first honey supers to your hives. For example, the longest treatment duration of current products is 42 days or 6 weeks, and the longest withdrawal period is 14 days or 2 weeks. This means sampling and subsequent treatment decisions must be made at least 56 days or 8 weeks before supering. Generally, mid to late April sampling is appropriate, but it is important to read and double-check product labels for precise application timing and withdrawal information. Each product has its own directions and timing, and application instructions may vary. Sampling shouldn't only take place in the spring, it should be an ongoing management activity to ensure colonies are healthy. Varroa levels can increase rapidly and unexpectedly, especially if your colonies are near other colonies that may be collapsing from high levels of Varroa mite. Even if you get the Varroa levels below the fall economic threshold, the health of the colony can still be impacted by viruses or other Varroa-related stresses. This combined stress can affect their ability to survive the winter. Sampling your colonies periodically, especially in the spring and fall, to monitor effectiveness of a treatment or assess unexpected increases in mite levels will allow better planning for future mite control activities. When sampling for Varroa, bees should be collected from the brood area frames. Reports show that this is important in the spring and fall, and especially in the fall. Varroa mites reproduce in brood cells, and when they emerge from these cells, they readily infest the young nurse bees that are tending to the brood. Research has shown that Varroa actually prefers drone cells. First, locate the queen and set that frame aside to be sure she isn't collected in the sample. When gathering a sample, tilting the frame makes it easier to collect the bees. The sample size should be at least 200 to 300 bees. By volume, this is approximately 100 milliliters, or at least a third of the size of a can of pop. Any appropriately sized jar with a lid can be used, or sample cups can be purchased from a beekeeping supply store. Bees that are collected and sealed in the container will quickly be knocked out as the CO2 they release builds up in the jar. When the bees are inactive, they are easier to handle and transfer into a preservative, such as an alcohol-based solution like rubbing alcohol or windshield wiper fluid. The bees should be completely submerged in this solution. Alternatively, the sample can be frozen. It is generally recommended that bees be collected from at least 5 colonies in a yard of 30 in order to form a representative sample. This may vary depending on many factors, such as the amount of variation in the yard. Each operation is unique, so the number of colonies to sample is at the discretion of the beekeeper. However, a more extensive sample will always strengthen the results. Identify the sample with name, date, and type of analysis needed. Once a sample has been collected, the level of Varroa can be assessed using a number of methods in the field or at the Manitoba Agriculture, Food and Rural Initiative's Apiculture Diagnostics Lab. The Bee Lab is available to beekeepers across the province. There, your infestation is determined by separating the mites from the bees using an alcohol wash in a mechanical shaker. The alcohol wash test is a very effective and accurate option, but it can take time. Therefore, in-field methods may be preferred. Two popular in-field methods for assessing Varroa are the bucket and Varroa handshaker methods. Both can be effective when done properly, but should be considered screening tests. A follow-up lab analysis may be warranted until you have confidence in the results of your in-field assessment. For the bucket method, you need a pail, windshield wiper fluid, screened basket, and straining cloth. These items can be picked up at a local hardware or beekeeping supply store. Fill the bucket half full with windshield wiper fluid. Place the straining cloth and basket in the bucket and empty the contents of the sample container into the basket. Agitate the sample for 1 to 2 minutes until it appears all mites have been shaken off. The bees will remain in the basket while the mites will settle onto the cloth. If high levels of mites are present, it may be obvious that the colonies need treatment without shaking for 2 minutes. This setup is bulky, and foaming can make counting the mites difficult. Due to the short time that the bees are in the solution and the short shaking time, it's likely not all mites are removed from the bees. The Varroa handshaker is available at beekeeping supply stores, or a similar tool can be made at home. The handshaker is made of 2 bottles, screwed together with a screen between them, and it comes with specific instructions. The shaking can break up the bees and make them difficult to count. Due to the limited screen opening, it is possible that mites may remain on the bees. Follow the instructions provided with the shaker. Although the Varroa handshaker is commercially available, producer-built shakers are also an option. The general premise is the same, and the end goal is to agitate the sample enough to allow the alcohol solution to separate the mites from the bees in order to calculate the mite infestation level. Another in-field method to monitor Varroa levels is to study the number of Varroa mites that naturally drop to the bottom board. To do this, put a screen and sticky board under the brood chamber and remove after 2 to 3 days. This method has the disadvantage of requiring 2 trips to the bee yard to assess the colonies prior to a treatment decision. Screen bottom boards are available commercially. Sticky boards are as well, or they can be made using a sticky spreadable substance, such as a thin layer of tanglefoot on white cardboard or plastic. Vegetable oil spray or shortening may also work, but is less sticky. As a general guideline for natural Varroa drop during brooding up periods, 1 Varroa mite on the sticky board per 24 hours suggests an infestation of at least 1%. Each of these in-field methods has merit and challenges. Producers are encouraged to try a number of methods to determine what works best for them. Ultimately, any method you use to monitor your Varroa levels is going to be better than doing nothing at all. Hoping for the best is not a control strategy, and treating without proper knowledge of your mite levels can be a costly and potentially unnecessary practice. Once the mites have been separated from the bees, it's time to calculate the level of infestation. To calculate your infestation, take the number of mites divided by the number of bees in your sample times 100. Varroa threshold levels for Manitoba are guidelines only and assume your bees are relatively free from other diseases and stresses. Threshold assessments should also consider other factors, including personal risk tolerance, tracheal mite, nosema, and other disease levels, queen age, temperature-dependent nature of some products, nutritional status of colony, stress due to adverse weather, chemical or contaminant exposure, colony-to-colony variation and confidence in sampling results, possibility of reinfection from nearby colonies, In early spring, a mite level of greater than 1% is considered high risk, and the threat of crop loss is likely. If your assessment shows an infestation of greater than 1% between April 1st and May 20th, treatment is recommended. If you have an infestation of less than 1% during this period, you may decide to apply a soft treatment or just to continue monitoring your colonies throughout the spring and fall periods, depending on your risk tolerance. In late spring, between May 20th and July 1st, a mite level of greater than 1% also means there is a high risk for crop loss. However, treatment at this time must be carefully selected because of the risk of treatment residue affecting your product. In the fall, there is much more variance in the economic thresholds. In early September, with lots of brood present, a mite level of 1 to 3% indicates treatment may not be required, but hives should be closely monitored and treated if honeybee tracheal mite is present. Varroa levels of greater than 3% at this time indicate treatment is necessary. If your assessment at this time shows evidence of an infestation of greater than 20%, treatment with an effective product is critical and should be followed up with sampling to assess effectiveness. It is likely that a follow-up treatment in the spring will also be required. If sampling between mid-September and the end of October with little brood present, colonies with up to 10% Varroa can survive winter without treatment. However, if such colonies are not treated in the fall, immediate treatment in the spring would be required. It should be noted that all thresholds assume the absence of tracheal mite. If tracheal mite is present in combination with Varroa mite, treatment for Varroa, tracheal mite, or both is required, or significant colony mortality can be expected over the winter. The thresholds were developed for the bee yard level and are based on the average infestation level in several colonies, where some variation is expected between colonies. Looking for mites on your bees is not a good way to decide if a treatment is needed. Once mites or wing deformity are seen, the bees are probably heavily infested with Varroa, and viruses are at damaging levels. The goal is to keep Varroa mite levels below the economic threshold or below damaging levels, especially when some Varroa control products offer limited or variable control. Rotating treatments and using cultural control methods and/or stock with higher levels of mite tolerance helps to minimize the development of resistance in mites and helps to avoid buildup of unwanted residues in the hive. Varroa is an ongoing and challenging problem that cannot be ignored. There are effective practices that, once put into place, can help you plan control strategies. Sampling helps you answer the question, "Do I need to treat?" And continuous monitoring helps you determine whether the treatment options you are using are effective. Early sampling and proper assessment tools are necessary, because looking for mites on your bees is not a good way to decide if treatment is needed. The goal is to keep mites below thresholds in order to avoid economic impact and to maintain the health of your colonies. This information will assist you in making the proper Varroa control decisions for your colonies. For more information regarding Varroa mite monitoring, please contact the Manitoba Beekeepers Association or your provincial apiculture diagnostics lab. This message was funded by Growing Forward, a federal provincial territorial initiative.